Sometimes, injustice doesn't scream it, whispers in routine stops, quiet threats, and silences no one questions. What happened to Samuel and Clara wasn't a one-time mistake. It was part of a pattern, one that didn't start at that diner and wouldn't end there. But what if someone dug deeper? What if the truth, long buried, finally surfaced? This isn't just the aftermath of one racist stop. It's the beginning of a reckoning. Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you or someone you love ever been judged, not for what they did, but for how they looked? If so, you're not alone. Drop your city or country in the comments, because the more we share these stories, the more we remind the world that injustice doesn't go unnoticed. And if stories like this matter to you, stories where the truth fights back, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling what others try to silence. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quiet street. Jamal Washington, a lanky 15-year-old boy, pedaled his bicycle casually along the sidewalk, earbuds dangling from his ears, music softly humming. He had a carefree smile, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his thoughts drifting toward basketball practice and homework assignments. Suddenly, a police cruiser swerved sharply, cutting him off and forcing Jamal to skid to a halt. His heart pounded wildly as confusion replaced his carefree expression. Two officers emerged quickly from the vehicle, their movements swift and intimidating. Officer Barnes, tall and muscular, stepped toward Jamal aggressively, his hand resting threateningly on his belt. "Off the bike, now!" Barnes barked sharply. Jamal quickly complied, stumbling slightly in his haste. His eyes darted anxiously between the officers, confusion and fear mixing visibly on his young face. "What's going on? Did I do something wrong?" The second officer, Officer Hayes, shorter but equally imposing, circled around Jamal, scrutinizing him with a cold stare. His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Nice bike. Looks expensive. You buy it yourself?" "It was a birthday gift from my mom," Jamal stammered, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't steal it." Barnes stepped closer, towering over Jamal, his eyes cold and dismissive. "Funny, doesn't look like you can afford something like that," he sneered. "Please, I'm telling the truth," Jamal pleaded, desperation edging his voice. He glanced around, hoping anyone would see what was happening. Hayes snatched the bike roughly, inspecting it as if expecting to find evidence of theft. Barnes leaned forward, inches from Jamal's face, his voice low and menacing. "Listen, kid, you can make this easy or hard. Where did you really get this bike?" Jamal's chest tightened, his eyes welling up in frustration and humiliation. "It's mine, sir. I swear," he whispered, barely audible now, choking back tears. Nearby, unnoticed by either officer, the small security camera mounted above the florist's shop captured every painful moment clearly, its tiny red light blinking steadily as it recorded the unfolding injustice. Night had fallen quietly over David's home, but his mind was anything but quiet. He paced slowly across his dimly lit living room, the events at the diner replaying over and over in his thoughts. He paused, taking a deep breath, then reached for his phone, scrolling until he found the familiar contact. Captain Renee Alvarez. With a heavy sigh, he dialed. The phone rang twice before Renee answered, her voice calm and authoritative. "Captain Alvarez." "Renee, it's David Peterson," he began, his voice heavy with tension. "David?" Renee's tone softened instantly, concern threading through her professionalism. "It's been a while. What's going on?" David exhaled slowly, his voice steady but strained. "Something happened today. My parents, they were harassed by local cops. It wasn't random, Renee. It felt deliberate, targeted." There was a brief pause as Renee absorbed the gravity of his words. "Tell me exactly what happened," she prompted gently but firmly. David recounted the day's events, the accusations, the humiliation his parents had endured. and the troubling patterns he'd begun piecing together. It wasn't just today, David said, frustration edging into his voice. There's something deeper going on here. It feels systemic, Renee. Renee remained quiet for a moment, processing his words. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of determination. David, I promise you, we're going to get to the bottom of this. If these officers have abused their authority, I'll make sure they're held accountable. Thanks, Renee, David responded, relief mingling with his lingering anger. My parents deserve justice. Everyone does. Renee's voice was steady, a quiet resolve behind her words. I'll be in town by tomorrow. We'll start the investigation immediately. Trust me, this won't stand. David ended the call, feeling a renewed sense of determination, but still haunted by an uneasy question. What else would their investigation uncover? The following afternoon, Captain Renee Alvarez sat in the small, dimly lit room of the local police precinct, surrounded by stacks of documents and screens displaying body camera footage. Her brow furrowed as she meticulously reviewed the recordings, her eyes narrowing as she scanned every detail, looking for inconsistencies or signs of misconduct. Suddenly, a particular timestamp caught her attention. She leaned forward, her breath shallow with anticipation, and replayed the footage. Renee's eyes widened in disbelief as she saw Officer Barnes manually entering information into the patrol car's computer, deliberately flagging the Peterson's license plate as suspicious. This was no random stop-it, was intentional, calculated harassment. Unbelievable, she whispered, a mixture of shock and anger flashing across her face. Renee quickly switched screens, bringing up the surveillance footage from the florist's shop. The image was grainy but clear enough. Barnes and Hayes harassing young Jamal Washington, their actions aggressive and unjustified. She paused the video, taking a deep breath as she processed the gravity of the evidence. Her jaw tightened, determination stealing her resolve. Renee knew she had enough proof to hold these officers accountable. Yet, beneath her resolve, a chilling question remained. How deep did this corruption run, and who else was involved? She picked up her phone decisively, her voice firm and unwavering as she made the call. David, we found it, and it's worse than we thought, but trust me, justice will be served. Bright camera flashes illuminated the tense faces gathered in front of the local courthouse steps. A large crowd had assembled, murmurs rippling through them as anticipation built. Captain Renee Alvarez stood confidently at the podium, her authoritative presence commanding immediate silence. Today, we address serious allegations of misconduct by officers within this police department, Renee began firmly, her voice resonating powerfully. We uncovered clear evidence of targeted harassment, abuse of authority, and deliberate racial profiling. These were not isolated incidents, but symptomatic of deeper issues within the department. Samuel and Clara stood close together beside David, their expressions a mixture of relief, lingering sadness, and quiet dignity. Clara gripped Samuel's hand tightly, her eyes glistening with tears as Renee spoke. Behind them, Jamal Washington stood with his mother, his young face reflecting a fragile mix of relief and nervousness. He looked up at David, finding reassurance in the Marine's steady gaze. Renee continued, her voice unwavering. Officers Barnes and Hayes intentionally flagged vehicles without cause, manufactured suspicion, and targeted innocent civilians based on racial profiling. These officers violated the very principles they swore to uphold. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs, voices raised in anger and disbelief. Some shouted demands for justice, others clapped loudly in support of Renee's strong stand. Officer Barnes and Hayes stood near the back of the crowd, their faces pale and rigid. Barnes' jaw clenched visibly, his fists tightening at his sides. Hayes' eyes darted nervously. Panic clearly etched across his features as the weight of their actions crashed down upon them publicly. Renee raised her hand to quiet the crowd again, her voice calm, yet resolute. Today, accountability begins. Officers Barnes and Hayes are hereby suspended immediately and placed under arrest pending criminal charges. Gasps echoed through the crowd, followed by thunderous applause and cries of support. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every moment as uniformed officers stepped forward to apprehend Barnes and Hayes, cuffing their wrists behind their backs. The disgraced officers were led away amidst a sea of condemning eyes. David watched silently, his expression a blend of satisfaction and lingering concern. Samuel wrapped an arm gently around Clara, who softly whispered a prayer of gratitude. But even as justice was being served, a troubling question lingered in David's mind. Was this truly the end, or just the beginning of a much larger fight? Golden sunlight bathed the peaceful field outside the diner, warming the faces of the small crowd gathered in respectful silence. A gentle breeze rustled through the nearby sunflowers, their bright petals shimmering softly as if sharing in the quiet reverence of the moment. At the heart of the gathering stood a simple, beautifully crafted wooden bench, its polished surface gleaming softly. Beside it, a plaque bearing elegant lettering read clearly, "In honor of Samuel and Clara Peterson, for dignity, for justice, for change." Samuel and Clara stood quietly, their hands tightly clasped, their eyes tracing the heartfelt words engraved before them. Clara's eyes filled with tears as a gentle smile touched her lips, gratitude and quiet strength shining in her expression. David stepped forward slowly, placing a comforting hand on each of his parents' shoulders. "This plaque isn't just for you." He spoke softly, his voice warm and reassuring. "It's for every person who stood with us, every voice that demanded justice." Samuel nodded, his eyes misty as he looked up at his son. "You've always made us proud, David," he said gently. "But today we feel hope again." Clara brushed away tears, squeezing David's hand tenderly. "You didn't just stand up for us," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You stood up for everyone who ever felt voiceless." Nearby, Jamal Washington laughed joyfully, chasing his younger sister playfully, their innocent laughter filling the air and echoing softly across the sunlit field. It was a poignant reminder of what true justice could safeguard. A neighborhood officer, newly assigned and warmly regarded by the community, walked past and respectfully tipped his hat to Samuel and Clara, a subtle yet powerful gesture of solidarity and change. David took a deep breath, looking out at the gathering, his expression calm yet determined. "We've made progress, but there's more to do," he stated clearly, conviction resonating in his voice. He turned his gaze toward the distant horizon, filled with quiet determination and hope. "We're just getting started." The town square buzzed with anticipation. Residents gathered closely beneath banners and American flags fluttering gently in the breeze. A modest podium stood front and center, microphones clustered tightly around it, awaiting the arrival of the man whose actions had already inspired change, David Peterson. David emerged confidently, wearing a neatly pressed suit and carrying an aura of quiet strength and determination. As he stepped onto the platform, applause erupted spontaneously, echoing warmly through the crowd. Cameras clicked continuously, capturing every determined stride, every hopeful glance. He cleared his throat gently and looked out over the sea of expectant faces. His voice, steady and resolute, resonated powerfully through the square. "Today, I'm announcing my candidacy for mayor. Our recent experiences have shown that justice isn't automatic. It's something we must actively pursue every single day. I promise to fight for fairness, accountability, and true representation for everyone in this town." The crowd burst into enthusiastic applause, many faces beaming with pride and hope. Yet, amidst the cheering, pockets of murmurs and hushed voices carried notes of tension and unease. At the edge of the gathering, a few individuals with hostile expressions exchanged dark glances. In the days that followed, Samuel and Clara felt a growing weight of anxiety and uncertainty. One morning, Samuel discovered a brick hurled through their living room window, glass scattered across the carpet, a crude note attached, reading, "Tell your son to quit or else." Clara held the note with trembling hands, fear etched deeply into her expression as tears welled in her eyes. David watched his parents struggle silently, his heart heavy yet resolved. He knew this battle would test them deeply, but backing down was never an option. Each threat only solidified his determination to confront injustice head-on, regardless of the consequences. Inside the brightly lit studio of the local TV station, Mayor Rick Callahan sat comfortably, his polished demeanor and charismatic smile carefully masking a deeply sinister intent. He leaned toward the interviewer, speaking with calculated charm. "David Peterson is undoubtedly a hero in uniform, but leading this town? That requires more than bravery. It requires experience and tough decision-making." Behind the camera's glare, however, Callahan's true nature surfaced subtly, his eyes narrowing slightly, a cold glint betraying his carefully crafted persona. He continued smoothly, "I respect his military service, truly. But let's be honest, managing a town isn't like running drills. It's complex, and Peterson just isn't equipped for that." Meanwhile, on the town's darker streets, Callahan's loyal supporters carried out his message with frightening clarity. Samuel and Clara began receiving threatening phone calls late at night, anonymous voices whispering chilling warnings. "Tell your son to back out before someone gets hurt." One evening, David stepped outside his house to find the tires of his car slashed, a single menacing note pinned to his windshield. "This is your only warning." The letters, crudely scrawled, radiated hostility and hatred. The violence escalated quickly. Campaign volunteers faced harassment while distributing flyers, their materials ripped from their hands, their efforts met with aggressive intimidation. Posters bearing David's image were torn and defaced, leaving an unmistakable atmosphere of fear. In a closed meeting, Callahan stood calmly before his closest followers, his voice chillingly steady. "We need to send Peterson a clear message. This town belongs to us, not outsiders with big ideas. Make sure he understands." His supporters nodded grimly, their faces set with determined malice, ready to carry out their leader's bidding. David sat rigidly in front of his television, remote clutched tightly in his hand as the evening news played. A fabricated headline scrolled across the screen in bold letters. "Peterson accused of anti-police agenda. Military conduct questioned." A slick, well-produced segment followed, twisting David's past service and painting his campaign as radical and dangerous. The anchor's voice droned with artificial concern. "While Peterson is known for his decorated military record, sources allege he once defied orders during a classified mission. Could his defiance follow him into office? And is his campaign quietly fueling anti-police sentiment under the guise of reform?" David's jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling as he tried to steady his breathing. "They're manufacturing lies," he muttered, stunned by the boldness of the deception. This is deliberate." In the kitchen, Clara watched the segment in disbelief, one hand pressed over her heart. "That's not our son. How can they say that? He's never disrespected anyone in uniform. He is the uniform." Samuel set down his coffee mug, his brow furrowed deeply. "They're trying to destroy him with lies, and they know it." Later that evening, members of the community gathered in a church basement for a town hall meeting. Supporters of David expressed their outrage, voices filled with emotion and defiance. "That man helped my nephew get into college," one mother shouted. "He stood up for his parents when no one else did. How dare they drag him through the mud?" "He's the only one who's spoken truth around here," another added. "They're scared because they know he's the real deal." David stood in the back of the room, quietly absorbing every word. Though the smear campaign had rattled him, the voices of his community gave him something stronger than fear purpose. He stepped forward and raised his voice. "They can try to twist my story. They can attack my character. But they can't silence the truth. I won't back down. Not now, not ever." A dimly lit back room in an old community center served as the makeshift meeting point. The air buzzed with unease. David stood near a table covered in campaign folders and voter lists, his campaign manager pacing anxiously. At exactly 9:00 p.m., the door creaked open. A woman stepped inside quickly, her hood drawn, sunglasses still on despite the low light. She didn't offer her name. "Lock the door," she said quietly. Her voice was tense, firm. David complied, then faced her, steady but cautious. "You said you had information. You've risked a lot to be here." The woman removed her glasses. Her eyes, sharp and weary, scanned the room. "I worked on Callahan's communications team for 2 years. I saw everything and I kept receipts." She pulled a flash drive from her coat and placed it on the table. "There are recordings of strategy meetings, donor transactions, even chats where he coordinated attacks on you online and on the street. He knows exactly what his supporters are doing. He encouraged it." David's campaign manager leaned forward, voice taut. "Are you saying he ordered the threats against David's family?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Not in so many words. But he gave his people the green light. Said, and I quote, 'Make Peterson regret running.'" David's expression hardened. He picked up the flash drive, his hand trembling slightly. "Why now? Why are you coming forward?" The woman looked him in the eye. "Because I thought I was helping someone strong. But all I saw was a coward hiding behind power and fear. You? You actually believe in something. You stood up when it mattered. That's why." Silence fell heavy over the room. David exhaled slowly, his grip tightening around the drive. "This changes everything," he said, voice low and resolute. His campaign manager stared at the door, then back at David. "We release it?" David nodded. "We release it. Let the truth speak for itself." Election day dawned with uneasy skies. Gray clouds loomed overhead as residents lined up at polling stations across town. Tension was thick in the air, faces tight with both hope and apprehension. Volunteers in David's colors moved cautiously, eyes darting as unmarked trucks circled polling places slowly. At several voting centers, Callahan's supporters lined the sidewalks, some wearing matching shirts, others holding signs with veiled threats. "Don't let outsiders steal your town," they chanted. Fights broke out at one location when a volunteer was shoved to the ground trying to assist an elderly voter. David received call after call intimidation at this station, slashed banners at another. His team scrambled to document everything, while Renee Alvarez coordinated with state officials to secure the voting locations. Then came the flashpoint. At the largest precinct downtown, David arrived to check on reports of voter suppression. He stepped out of his vehicle to find Rick Callahan already there, flanked by supporters, casually shaking hands with bystanders while reporters circled nearby. David walked straight toward him. The crowd hushed. "Still pretending to play hero, Peterson?" Callahan sneered, his smile practiced, his voice just loud enough for nearby cameras to catch. David stood firm. "You've lied, intimidated, and threatened to hold on to power. Today it ends." Callahan scoffed. "This town doesn't want change. It wants control, and I gave it to them." David leaned in slightly, his voice razor-sharp. "You didn't lead this town. You poisoned it. With fear, with hate. People are done being afraid of you." A reporter stepped forward. "Mr. Peterson, do you have evidence to back your accusations?" Without breaking eye contact, David pulled a phone from his pocket and tapped play. Over the speaker, Callahan's own voice echoed unmistakably. "Make Peterson regret running. Use whatever pressure you need. We can't lose this." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Callahan's face blanched. Cameras pivoted wildly as reporters surged forward. People shouted. Someone called out, "That's him, he said it himself." The informant stepped from the edge of the crowd, her identity now public. "Everything on that flash drive is real, and there's more. Financial fraud, fake donors, it's all there." As Callahan stammered for a response, sirens wailed in the distance. Law enforcement moved through the crowd with purpose. David remained still, watching as the man who once controlled the town with fear now stood exposed, his empire cracking beneath the weight of truth. The town square overflowed with people, but this time the tension was gone, replaced by joy, pride, and a sense of long-awaited justice. Red, white, and blue ribbons draped every post, and handmade signs waved in the air. Justice won. Our mayor, our voice, and thank you, David. Children sat on shoulders, elders hugged one another, and laughter echoed freely between the buildings. On the raised platform at the center, David stood behind a sleek wooden podium, his eyes scanning the crowd. His expression was calm but full of emotion. The election had ended in a landslide. Rick Callahan had not only lost, had been arrested and publicly disgraced. The town had spoken. Clara and Samuel sat in the front row, holding hands, tears glistening as they looked up at their son. Behind them stood veterans, teachers, local business owners, and young students, all united. David adjusted the microphone. His voice, when it came, was steady, deep, and full of heart. "This victory doesn't belong to mate, belongs to every person who ever felt unseen, unheard, or unprotected in their own town. This moment is yours." He paused, emotion catching in his throat before he continued. "To my parents, Samuel and Clara Peterson, who taught me what strength and dignity look like, this moment is for you. You endured pain with grace, and you reminded us that courage often comes wrapped in quiet resistance." The crowd erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. Clara placed a hand over her heart, overcome. Samuel nodded solemnly, pride etched into every line of his face. David went on, his voice rising with hope. "We have work ahead, rebuilding trust, repairing systems, restoring what fear once broke, but we'll do it together, and we'll lead with truth, compassion, and honor. Because the soul of this town is worth fighting for." He raised his hand, pointing to the sky above the courthouse. "We're not going back. We're moving forward, and I promise you this is only the beginning." The crowd roared in approval, flags waving, voices lifted. In that moment, the square transformed into more than a celebration. It became a symbol of what's possible when courage meets community. As the crowd slowly dispersed, sunlight poured over the town square like a blessing. But even amid the joy, David remained grounded, his gaze fixed not on the cheering faces but on the horizon. He stepped down from the podium, greeting well-wishers with handshakes and hugs, but his smile faded slightly as he caught sight of a lone figure watching from a distance, one of Callahan's former aides. Phone in hand, expression unreadable. A subtle reminder that some shadows don't vanish overnight. Later that evening, David stood alone in his office, the mayor's seal freshly mounted behind his desk. The flash drive from the informant now rested in a secure folder, its contents deeper and more far-reaching than anyone had expected. Names, money trails, a web that extended beyond Callahan, possibly into the next county, or even higher. He picked up a folder marked "Pending Investigations" and sighed. From the hallway, Clara's soft voice floated in. "You okay, baby?" David looked up, the weight of leadership pressing down on him, but his voice remained calm. "I'm fine, Mama. Just taking it all in." She nodded and smiled gently. "We're proud of you, no matter how hard it gets." He nodded back, grateful. But as the door closed and silence returned, David whispered to himself. This was the first battle, not the last. The screen fades to black, and the narrator's voice returns calm, steady, reflective. Real change never comes easy. Power doesn't surrender without a fight. But when courage speaks, and community stands behind it, even the loudest tyrants fall silent. David Peterson may have won the election, but the truth he's about to uncover could shake the foundations of everything. What happened to the Petersons isn't just their story, it's a mirror for all of us. A reminder that silence protects no one, and courage isn't loud, it's consistent. If this story moved you, drop a love emoji in the comments. Share your thoughts, your city, your voice. Because when one of us speaks up, others find the strength to do the same. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the fight for justice isn't over, and neither are the stories we have to tell.